Hey there, friends. It's Catherine Massell here, spiritual growth mentor, ascending earth creatrix, master energy healer. Hello. How is your week going? How is this eclipse season going for you? I know it's intense for some of us, but there's some good news with that because we get to do something fun as all this old programming of self, the old patterning of self falls away. We get to reinvent ourselves. And I know for some of you that's like cue, eye roll, and it is not something that sounds very appetizing, but depends on your perspective, I suppose. Let me see if I can find myself here. I think I am live on the right page. I should probably check on that. But I wanted to talk about, this idea of reinventing yourself sounds like such a tough concept for us as women. And I want to kind of break that down a little bit so it makes some sense. Let me find myself here. And I'm going to share this in a couple places. Maybe some people will jump on. I don't know. Hopefully. Okay, there I am. Online and in life, it takes a while to find yourself. Let's see. I'm going to share my timeline and on my Lake Tahoe Master Energy Healer page. Beautiful. So, what does that mean, reinventing yourself? And what does that mean, especially for women? Because this is a little tougher for women to grasp. How do you reinvent yourself? What does that take? What does that involve? And what are the first steps? And why do you want to do it? So, reinventing yourself is really about no longer giving in to the old you and the patterning of the old you. We all have an identity, we all have a personality, we all have a personal reality created because of the personality and the identity that we have. Our whole personality defines us. It gives us a sense of being somebody, okay? But this somebody, sometimes, for most of us, has been created by default. We keep having this interaction with our outer reality, the events, the experiences, the people that are in our everyday world because of our reactions and responses to that, which makes up our outer reality. Hi, Beck. We have allowed ourselves to define who we are in reference to that without realizing that we have this very powerful, innate, higher intelligence running the show inside of us. And that has the ability to also create our reality, our whole personal definition of who we think we are, who we believe we are, who we want to be. Instead of having the outer reality tell us who we are, we can have this inner reality that allows us to tell us not only who we truly are in the truest, most authentic, most genuine versions of ourselves, us as spiritual beings having this human experience, but we get to create our whole outer reality when we wire ourselves to this new way of being, or I should say the truest way of being, based on this higher intelligence that's running through us, that's coursing through us all the time. But this higher intelligence that we have, this, whether you want to call it spirit, source consciousness, whatever you would like to call it or equate that with, this is always running things, but not in the same way that the ego runs things, because the ego needs to be heard, the ego needs to be known, the ego needs to be recognized. The ego needs placating. And it's the ego that kicks and screams and throws a tantrum whenever we try to change something in our lives, because the ego does not like change. Because if the ego feels like it's going to be usurped, if it's going to be overthrown, if there's going to be a coup to the ego, the ego self, which is largely the identity that you have established for yourself, it will kick and scream and throw a tantrum and throw a fight and resist this whole process. That's why for many of us change feels so difficult. So when you talk about reinventing the self, that means everything about you, your entire identity, your entire personality, your entire personal reality changes. Now, for some of this happens because we have something that blows up in our life. Meaning we've gotten to a point where we couldn't sustain the person we were being or have been. So something had to blow up, something had to change, because we just couldn't keep going on that way anymore. We fizzled out, the fuse blew, okay? So some of us have been in a situation where we've had to reinvent ourselves out of necessity and out of a sense of urgency or desperation. But we don't have to reinvent ourselves with that survival mode thinking and survival mode consciousness. We can reinvent the self from a totally creative place where we align with the higher intelligence that I just talked about. We align with that energy within, and we create from that space instead. And what happens when you reinvent the self from this higher level of consciousness, we do it from a place of joy. We do it from a place of inspiration. We do it from a place of tapping into the highest creative levels available to us. Okay. Now, this is a tough concept for the women that I work with, who I've worked with in groups and worked with in private sessions to help them reinvent themselves because they got to a point in their lives where they didn't like the way anything was going. So it was this energy of let's scrap the whole thing and let's start over. I want a whole new template. I want a whole new foundation to create my world from, okay? And that's one of the things that I help women do. And what has been really interesting to me and has been this common thread from the women that I've worked with in groups and the women that I've worked with on one-to-one levels, personal or private sessions, there's been this common thread. And that is that they have gone after with a lot of vim and vigor, this kind of spiritual awakening process. You know, they've sought out, spiritual activation, spiritual alignments, done a lot of guided meditations, maybe even gone into, deep theta healing, got into transcendental meditation, like deep spiritual awakening, working with the chakras, kundalini awakening processes, all kinds of different spiritual pursuits to awaken themselves and to feel more connected to that higher intelligence within. And the theme that runs throughout these women that I've worked with is that they've done this, but then they go back to their everyday lives and they have no idea how to integrate this spiritual awakening into their everyday lives to help them kind of navigate the challenges, the issues that we all face in our modern, everyday, contemporary society. It's great to have this Kundalini awakening, but what does that mean for me when I show up at work and I still have this snide coworker that's talking smack to me all the time? Maybe I might be able to deal with them with a little more compassion and forgiveness, but how do I rise above hearing the criticism and allowing that to affect me? How do I take this series of spiritual activations or alignments and then reconcile that with the fact that my marriage is failing? That the life I have with my life partner is falling apart. How do I integrate that into my humanness? So, hi Tammy. Hello, gorgeous. So this common theme that's running throughout is that we are really awake. We've done all this spiritual awakening, and that's wonderful. And I'm someone that is a big proponent of that. And I teach a lot of spiritual awakening in my own right. But where I feel we fall short, and where I really feel we need to close this gap between the spiritual awakening that we're experiencing and having a human awakening process take hold of us in a very profound way, is being able to find those steps of like, well, how do I take the spiritual awakening and have it be a plan or steps or a real tangible path for me to walk, a way for me to be guided towards having a level of experience in my everyday human life that feels awake and alive and enlightened. where I'm navigating my everyday life and kind of jumping over the hurdles and challenges of my everyday life and still feeling like I am the spiritual being. Still feeling like I am in control. Like I feel in control, or I feel aligned, or I feel enlightened, or I feel awakened when I'm in a spiritual activation or alignment, or I'm having a transcendental trance meditation or something like that. How do I take that level of experience and bring it into my everyday life? Well, here's the thing. You can have all of these spirit awakenings. You can have all of these activations, alignments, these healings, and you can feel great, and that's wonderful. But if you go back to being the same old you after that activation, that meditation, that awakening process is over, what does that say? We're really not evolving. We're really not expanding. We're not taking the spiritual awakening and expanding it into our human awakening process. How do we close the gap on that? Well, if you ask me, we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to reinvent the way we pattern our everyday lives. We have to interrupt the programming of survival consciousness that has been running the show for many of us, for most of humanity, for a really long time. We need to start thinking different thoughts. We need to start feeling different feelings. We need to start showing up in the world and behaving in different ways. We need to be showing up in our lives and behaving in different ways, thinking in new ways, feeling in new ways. And for the women that I work with, this is a really tough concept, because reinventing the self means you have to be really, really clear on who it is that you want to become. Who is this highest ideal version of you that you wish to embody? We are really good at knowing what it is that we don't want. We are excellent at it. Go ahead and ask anybody in your life, the person you're sitting next to on the bus, the person you're sitting next to, your coworker in the cubicle next to you, your wife or your husband when you go home, your kid. Ask them what they don't want. They can answer in a heartbeat. Ask someone what they really, really want. Ask someone what their highest ideal is of themselves. You're gonna hear some dead air. Now, there may be some people who have a really good idea about who that highest idealized version is of themselves. I do. I have to, because that's what I teach women to know about themselves. This is something that women really have a tough time with. We feel really challenged by. And the first step in actually reinventing the self is being able to have this level of clarity. And if you don't have this, you don't know who or what you are inventing. You know what needs to fall away, and that's wonderful. You know what you want to release in your life. You know what you would like to let go of. You know what you no longer want to experience, to feel or think. But oftentimes, and especially as women, we really don't know or feel like we have permission to be very, very clear about what it is that we'd like to be, who we'd like to be, what it is that we'd like to have. It's a tough concept, but you have to have this clarity on who you want to be. That's the first step, really, in reinventing the self. As you start initiating steps and taking a path towards reinventing the self, the first thing to do is have the other things fall away that you don't want. But you need to have something in mind this whole time of what you are working towards, right? You have to create a you. This is the toughest part too. When we are reinventing the self, we are still suffering as women from this hangover of systemic, historical, downplaying, disavowing of our own gifts, our talents, our abilities, and our desires. We have systemically, historically, politically, religiously been told to downplay who it is that we are, to not really show up in the truth of ourselves, to not really be able to fully express ourselves. And that means that we don't really feel that these desires that we have are really truly ours. We're kind of gun shy because we feel like if I say what I really, really want, someone's just going to come and take it away. And it just won't be mine. I won't have it. We're still suffering this kind of systemic, historical, religious, political hangover of being disavowed, having our worth downplayed for a couple thousand years, basically. We're still suffering this hangover. And so we still think that it's not right for us to ask for what we want, to be very clear and concise and specific and detailed about what we want. That's another challenge as well. We feel like we ask for like a version of it, we ask for a shadow of it, and then maybe we test the waters, we dip our big toe in the waters and see like, is this okay? Can I have this? And then we feel like we can go bigger. And don't get me wrong, there are some women who are like, balls to the wall, really good at figuring out what it is that they want, and they're really adept at asking for it, and they're really, really great at going after it. There are some women who I love who can do that. But for a lot of women, this isn't true. A lot of women have no idea what it means to reinvent the self, how to have the clarity on even what that means about who you're going to look like. Who is this ideal version of you? How does she show up in the world? How does she present herself? How does she talk about herself? How does she hold herself? What is her carriage? Does she stand up straight? Does she walk into a room and people take notice? Does she ask for what she wants unabashedly? Does she ask for what she wants without a level of compromise? And does she know in her heart of hearts that she's going to get it? Because she's got that drive, she's got that passion, she's got that know-how, that maybe I don't really know how it's going to show up, but I know that I'm going to step up every day and act like it's going to happen, because it is. It's just a foregone conclusion. Like, who is that woman? For me, for a long time, I had an idea of who she was, and that's what I wanted, but I had no idea how to be her. I had no idea how to show up in the world and be her every day. So I had to get really detailed and specific about, if I was going to reinvent myself, what is she going to look like? What is she going to say? What kind of things does she do in her day? What kind of people does she hang out with? What kind of books does she read? What kind of things is she doing in her life? What kind of goals and desires does she have long term? If you are after transformation and reinventing the self, you have to get super duper crystal clear about who this ideal version of you is. Who is she? And this is tough. This is tough for women. And you wonder, like, why, if we've had this systemical, this historical, this religious, this political kind of downplaying of the feminine power for so long, is it any wonder why so many of us have so much sacral wounding, how much, mother wounding we have? Because we have this legacy of lack, of disavowal, of disenfranchisement. That comes through the DNA. That comes through the matrilineal line for thousands of years. Why do you think we have so much sacral mother wounding? Because we inherit it over and over and again. It may skip a generation here or there, but this is something that's been handed down to us. So if you don't reinvent the self, you're bringing that element into your present and future reality too. So you can see there's almost this imperative then for us to reinvent ourselves, to bring a whole new definition to not only us on an individual level, but us for women as a collective, okay? Reinventing the self is almost a collective imperative for women when you think about it. And so when I see women not supporting each other, when I see women disavowing each other, it stabs me right in the friggin' heart. Because I grew up with this. I had a lot of wounding that I had to deal with because other girls were really cruel to me growing up. And it actually made me step into the role that I am now, where I really support women and I I try to bring as much community to women as I possibly can. A lot of camaraderie, support, love. If you've ever worked with me, you know that I'm all about supporting you. I'm all about being there for you. I'm your biggest friggin' cheerleader. And it's in spite of the experiences that I had growing up, but it's also when you come at something that's painful with so much love that it absorbs all that shadow, it absorbs all that dark. So the reason I do what I do is to have so much love in what I share and what I offer to people that it absorbs any darkness. So when I see women competing with each other, disavowing each other, disinheriting, disenfranchising each other, number one, I'm going to be the first one to step in and say, okay, what you doing, sister, it ain't right. It ain't right. Think about what you're doing. Think about why you're doing it. You're playing into a system that was set up and you had no part in creating the rules for it, but you're playing out a paradigm that its time has come. We have so much power and support for each other that if we're talking about a collective reinventing of the self as women, our task as women is to lift up and support other women all the time. I didn't mean to make this conversation about this, but it's really, really passionate. And that's another part of being able to reinvent the self, that when you do that as a woman, you are leading by example. You're leading with light. And if you are leading in the highest integrity, if you are reinventing yourself, and you are reinventing yourself in such a way that you are living out the highest idealized version of yourself, that means that you have altruistic traits that you are sharing with the world, and it is rippling out. You are reinventing yourself with a greater ability to listen, to hold space for other people, to forgive, to be merciful, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be understanding. This is how we're really reinventing the self and leading with light as the divine feminine. So talk about the collective feminine energy of reinvention. This is what it's about. And this is how we, as women, absorb the darkness into our light. Okay, so think about that for a second, too. We have a lot of responsibility here. We always have, as women. But the paradigm of power is shifting. And the paradigm of power is shifting so much that we are the wielders, the creators, the holders of power now as women, where we get to change the whole definition. We get to redefine what power means. Power is leading with light. Power is leading by example with altruistic traits that I just talked about. Mercy, compassion, kindness, nurturing, right? But if we don't know how to do this for ourselves first, like I said, if you're someone that's seeking a level of spiritual awakening where you're doing all the energy activations, you're doing all the guided meditations, you're doing all the awakening processes, but you go back and you live your life in a way where you're thinking the same thoughts you did yesterday and they're negative, and you're feeling the same things you felt yesterday and they're disempowering, and you're acting or behaving the same way that you did yesterday and it is diminishing your worth or someone else's, you are not shifting that power paradigm. How do you begin to do this? Number one, clarity on who it is that you want to become. And what I want to share with you is this kind of reclaiming, the reinventing yourself aspect that so many of us have such a hard time with, is really understanding, like, how do we close the gap then on who it is that we have been, that past self that we keep bringing into the present every single day by thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same things, acting in the same way that we did yesterday. Through doing that, we continue to bring the past into the present and our future over and over and over again. We're doomed to repeat this if nothing changes, okay? And because of the major paradigm shifts that are happening, it's almost this collective imperative for us as women, let alone on an individual level, to reinvent ourselves. And reinventing the self means you have to think different thoughts. You have to feel different feelings. You have to show up and behave in different ways in your life. It doesn't happen without these three things at play. That is our call to action for ascension, especially for us as women. It's part of it. It's not the whole thing, but it's a big part of it. So how do you close the gap? on who you were in your past and this highest ideal version of yourself that you hold yourself up to. What is this ideal? What is this way of being? Are you even clear on who that is? So I want to spend 3 days with you where I help you do that. So this Thursday, this Friday, and this Saturday, which is the 24th, the 25th, and 26th at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, I'm going to be sharing 3 days of talks, of insights from my work with women in my group courses, my group programs, where I help them to reinvent the self, and in my private sessions, what it has taken some women to do this, to reinvent the self. How do you do it? How do you close the gap on who you were yesterday between that person and the ideal version of you? How do you craft that? How do you cultivate her and live as her now? So I've got 3 days of talks scheduled for you guys where I want to share this with you. And yes, this is leading to a program that I am offering. Become the Creatrix is where I teach you how to do this, to reinvent the self with an actual plan, with steps. They are easy to follow. The process of becoming the Creatrix, of reinventing the self, is not the easiest thing. I'm not going to lie to you. Because that old you that I talked about that is conditioned by ego is going to fight and kick and scream and throw a tantrum and resist the whole process. But the women who are in my Evolve and Expand program right now, what they're understanding is that once you get past the second and third week of this, and you start realizing with such incredible amount of awareness and recognition, this person you have been and how much she has limited you and diminished you. And you're at this point now where you get to create the new self. You get to invent the new you. You get to move into this place where you have this really profound realization. And I'll tell you what it is. That you get to create a self that you absolutely get to fall in love with. And if that doesn't hit you in the feels, you don't have a pulse. Think about that. If you had the ability to create a you, to reinvent the self, that you get to fall in love with, you just love her so much, what would your everyday life be like? What would you be doing? Who would you be with? People who also fall in love with you. You'd have no need anymore for diminishing or discounting the self. Because if you're that in love with the you, the highest ideal version of yourself that you could possibly be, if you are so in love with her, nothing outside of that could move you to a lesser state of being. Nothing. Because that's the power of love, right? It absorbs and kind of negates the darkness. So let's take some steps together where I show you how to do that. So this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, the 24th, the 25th, and the 26th at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Join me right here on this business page. I will put the link here so you can see it. This is where I'll be going live. If you go to my website, which is catherinemissel.com, if you're there for I think it's 8 seconds, if you're not on my email list already, sign up on my email list because, it's 5 seconds. It says, be the first to know about energy activations, limited offerings, and free special events. Go ahead and sign up for my email because when this is over on Saturday, right after we're done with this 3 days of talks, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, on Saturday I'm going to be sending you a special offer for the Become the Creatrix program, which starts on February 7th. And that's only going to be if you're on my email list. That's the only way you can get it. And I have a special bonus for you that I'm going to share with you there as well. So go ahead and get signed up on the email list. If you go to catherinemissel.com, and if you're there for 4 seconds, you can sign up for the email and you'll be able to get that offer. It's going to be a limited time offer. You'll have to jump on it on Saturday or Sunday, but also there'll be a free bonus for you guys that you can enjoy as well. So I look forward to seeing you Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Let's talk about reinventing yourself with love and creating a you that you fall in love with. Okay, so I hope to see you guys then. If you're watching this, please put in #replay. Share this video as well. That would be wonderful. And I want to wish you so much love and peace. I'll see you Thursday. Bye.